All right. Thank you all for joining us today. My name is Jessica Worthington. I'm the Director of the Office of Downtown Development with the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. And welcome to Third Thursday. We have a little bit of a different format that's going to be going on today. I do something once a year called the State of the Program. And this is a presentation that I give compiled with data that you guys are providing us, that National Main Street's providing us, that we get from our monthly reporting and our manager survey. And so normally when we do these Third Thursdays, we kick it off, we kind of go around, introduce anybody that is newer, do some updates as far as like what's going on in the network and stuff like that. I kind of want to like flip that on its head. And so this time, just because I want to make sure I have enough time to cover everything that's important, we're going to just deep dive straight in to the presentation. And then at the end, depending how much time we have, we'll do questions about anything that we just talked about, have a dialogue about that, as well as introductions to any of the new managers that have joined us today, and kind of go from there. Full disclosure, again, this is being recorded. So if you have to hop off early, you'll be able to check it out later on our YouTube channel, or if you have a friend, a manager friend that's missing something today, you can always direct them there and they can catch up on anything they've lost. All right, I am going to pull up my presentation. Give me 1 second. And Ellen, can you see that? Okay. Just wanted to double check. All right, guys. So our state of the program, I looked back in our records, and I believe the first time we did one of these was when Billy Peppers was still here. And it was back in 2015. And I looked at it because I wanted to like pull some data and be able to do some comparisons. And it was a very different format. So we were talking more about trainings and different things that were going on. And so it has a very different feel. But again, for those who is the first time that they've ever gotten to sit through one of these, you provide us with monthly reporting, you provide us with that annual manager survey. And what we like to do is we go through all that data, find trends, analyze it, see what is evolving in the network, and be able to give that back to you in what we call the state of the program. So with that being said,
City Voice to Walking Main Street office. I'm either away from my desk or on another call. Please leave your name, number, and a brief message.
Hold on 1 second.
If you're calling about Roseville Cemetery, please hang up and contact City Hall at 706-245.
There we go. All right. So what we're going to cover today, I'm going to introduce the team real quickly. We're going to go into the 2022 Georgia Main Street impact. We're going to talk about the National Main Street Trend Survey and how that relates to our manager results in our survey that we did in the beginning of this year, and then talking about what's coming up for the rest of this year, and then some high-level assessment takeaways from our meetings in South Georgia. So to meet our team, again, my name is Jessica Worthington. I'm the Director of the Office of Downtown Development. I have been with DCA for 10 years as of this month. So I came to DCA as the communications and training coordinator and was here for a couple of years before I moved up into the position of director. And prior to that, I was in local government as the Main Street manager with the city of Carrollton. We have on our team, I'm going to start from the top left and kind of make our way around clockwise. So we have Ellen Hill. She is our Main Street Training and Compliance Coordinator. She's been with us a year this month. Woo-hoo. And I will also say that this is the first time in a few years that we are fully staffed making this presentation. That's super exciting. And Ellen came to us from the Valdosta Main Street program and was in local government doing Main Street on the local level for about 15 years. Then we have Ebony Simpson, and Ebony is our organization and strategic planning coordinator and has been so instrumental in us getting our strategic planning process up and running, getting us trained, getting us ready to go. Ebony has a ton of varied experience all over, from DCA to local government to on the ground working with development authorities, redevelopment authorities, historic preservation background, working in the planning department at DCA with the Plan First program and doing a lot of their outreach before coming over to our office. So she is an incredible resource, and we are so excited to have her as part of the team. Then we have Tess Harper, who is our communications coordinator, and all those things that you receive from us, whether it is our newsletter or if you've seen our new logo recently for our coffee and conversations, all driven by Tess. All the videos, if you've been able to check out our Switch to Six training platform and check out all those videos, again, all led and managed by Tess. Oops, sorry guys, I had a message pop up and I was trying to get rid of it, and now it's making me go ahead for some reason, and I'm trying, there we go. All right, back to where we were. And then last but not least, Elizabeth Elliott, our downtown development historic preservation planner. Elizabeth has been with our office now, oh my gosh, Elizabeth, 5 years? Oh my gosh, it's crazy. Where's the time gone? And sorry guys, I keep getting like notifications popping up. I'm like, this is why I normally do this on GoToWebinar, so I don't see notifications like popping up, and it's like throwing me off. But y'all remember that Elizabeth, prior to Ellen coming on board, was really hands-in and involved in our annual assessment and accreditation process, and we have since transitioned a lot of that over to Ellen. Elizabeth is still taking a strong lead in working with our startup programs and our affiliates, getting them onboarded, on track, talking to communities who are trying to build capacity and grow from there, as well as she is kind of our in-house preservation person go-to for all things preservation related / where do we start with this? What can we do? How does this work? And she's also the person that really helps us with developing policies and procedures, and like she likes to say, the accountability buddy, not just for y'all, but also for us internally, helping keep us on track at all times. So we're going to start with 2022's Main Street Impact. Again, I take this from the monthly reporting that y'all share with us. Okay, so I will say, first off, a lot of the data, aligns and tracks with where we've seen the evolution of like the Georgia Main Street Network going over the past few years. Everything's moving in the right direction. Despite the pandemic, we really have been nonstop, full throttle, which is exciting. And we know that we changed the monthly reporting process this past year. And so that's actually been interesting, because I've been able to see and do a little bit of a deep dive into certain areas of the numbers that we've gathered, and kind of get a better perspective on where certain things are happening or evolving. And I think it's giving us a better feel for what is happening on the ground with you guys, and kind of where, especially like when it comes to buildings being rehabilitated, where that emphasis is being placed. So in 2022, we had 976 buildings being rehabilitated, equaling a whopping $327 million, which is truly, truly incredible. And I really loved it because, as you guys are familiar with the monthly reporting process now at this point, we asked you to kind of break it down for us on whether it was a commercial rehab, a residential rehab, or a mixed use. And I love this because typically we've just really lumped it all together as just like, tell us what rehabs have been going on. But I think this gives us a much better feel for like where that emphasis is being placed in rehabs. And so I can tell you, because of the way we collect data now, that 733 commercial rehabs, just commercial rehabs, took place with a $299 million impact. That we saw 197 residential rehabs. And remember, that's not necessarily new units being created. This is rehabs with a $6.9 million impact. And then we saw some mixed use happening. So 46 mixed use rehab projects occurring with a $21.7 million impact. And again, I just thought that was really interesting for us to be able to break it down into those categories. We have 661 public improvement projects. I will tell you, this number is one off from what it was last year. So last year it was 662. This year it's 661. So we must be, vibing and thriving the same way. And we had an impact of $35 million in regards to public improvement projects. And you'll also notice that on the pictures that I've included throughout the presentation, I've tried to make note of the community that it highlights. And some of that is because some of the pictures are from online. So it's going to be something from Picture Georgia, which is a platform of Explore Georgia. So there may be more tourism driven. It's not something we've necessarily taken, but then other pictures come from us as we are touring and meeting with communities. And I know that we get questions of, wait, where is that? And so I decided to, let's throw in those community names as we have them. So that way you guys can see where some of these projects are taking place. And this picture actually comes from Hey Hira, that did a beautiful Veterans Memorial Park with the fountain, and back there on the right hand side is an incredible depot and just an incredible green space for presentations, performances, and that kind of stuff. 446 new housing units. We had the opportunity when we were down in Brunswick for annual assessments to tour the Crest Hotel, the new boutique Crest Hotel, which was truly incredible. And with those 446 new housing units, equaling $160 million of private investment. And so housing is still, I would say, a priority for downtowns and downtown districts. And I'll kind of touch on that a little bit later, but the number of new housing units is down. And I think it directly correlates to some of the challenges that our local programs are seeing. And again, like I said, I will revisit that in a little bit. We saw a little over 1,100 new businesses opening or expanding, again, with a little over 3,300 net new jobs created. So we keep talking about year after year that the amount of net jobs created is equal to a Kia plant opening in our state every single year. And that still remains true. I think, at this point, we've opened something like 40 plus Kia plants in the state of Georgia with the amount of jobs that have been created. And again, that's not just jobs, that's net jobs. So that's like us including the jobs that have been lost as well as the jobs that have been gained. And so if people tell you that downtown development is just about events, I'm here to tell you that it isn't. It is truly about economic development and how we can help these neighborhoods and districts and commercial historic areas thrive and really grow. And then our total private public investment for the entire year was at $1.35 billion, billion with a B, yes. I will tell you that if I looked at this number 10 years ago and you would have told me this is where we would have been, I would have probably just laughed and said that there was too many zeros somewhere. But it isn't, because we have some incredible things happening around the state. There's still a lot of property being purchased. That's a huge contributor to this number. Again, you saw how much is happening with rehabs and investment. And private investment is really, really exponentially growing in our state. And it's incredible to see. And so just looking at the data, I wanted to be able to, kind of make some observations. So this was the largest one-year impact ever recorded. And it's funny because I've had that little component as the top first thing for the past 3 years, because each year we keep talking about how we're having the largest impact on record, which is incredible. And that $1.35 billion impact is equal to a 10% growth just from the previous year. So that's incredible. I told you we had about the same amount of public improvement projects -1, right? So really basically spot on. But one of the interesting things about it was that the investment was half of what it was. And so to me, what that means is that we are seeing roughly the same amount of public improvement projects happening, but it's on a smaller scale, right? So if we're doing things, we're doing smaller things, maybe not those real big financial tickets, big financial ticketed items that we've seen previously. But again, people are still putting that money and that investment in. But what I think is incredible is that while that public investment in those public improvement projects is, reducing itself a little bit, the private investment where we want to see that huge growth is truly taking off. And so we talked several years ago during 2020 about that there was a ton of investment happening in the context of people purchasing property. And we knew that at some point that investment in purchasing would turn into investment in rehabilitation, right? And that people needed to be prepared for that, because at some point it was coming. And I will tell you, it's hit. So this past year, the investment in rehab projects, so the amount of private investment that's been put into rehab projects, has increased 120% from the number that we saw the previous year. So again, it is no longer the situation of people buying property and sitting on property. We're actually investing in that property and seeing what we can do to move it forward. And then one of the things that I also noticed was that while we did have less new businesses opening this year, and that does equal a little bit less new jobs, I will say it wasn't substantial in the way that it's something that we should be concerned or scared about. But one of the things that we have heard a lot during the annual assessment process is that especially to real economic driven programs like the rural zone and downtown development revolving loan fund and other kind of local things that you guys have put together using ARPA funds and stuff like that, that a lot of our programs are at the higher level of capacity in their districts, right? We've heard several programs this year say we're at 100% capacity. We're at 95% capacity. We're right up there. We don't have space for all the demand of people wanting to locate businesses downtown. And it's a great problem to have. But when we look at our numbers, we also have to look at it through that lens, because unless we have places for people to open businesses, that means in theory, we're also going to have less businesses opening and less new jobs being created because of those new businesses opening. We may see some growth like we have in the areas of business expansion. So as a business is expanding its footprint or growing what it's doing, its offerings, its inventory, whatever that looks like, its staff, in order to meet greater demands, we're seeing jobs created there, here and there. but not kind of like the level that we've seen in previous years when, you have a lot more vacancies. And so therefore that equates to a lot of new businesses and a lot of new jobs. But I would not say, this is something that we're concerned about in the sense of we're worried about the economy or where things are going in the aspect of downtown. It's a good problem to have, but it's also something that we know we need to kind of like keep on the radar and be aware of. So National Main Street does a survey every year, and they release it around the same time that we release ours. And I do apologize because Ellen was reaching out to a lot of people saying, hey, you need to take our survey. And I was also saying to people, hey, take this survey. And what y'all didn't we didn't necessarily communicate well enough is that they were two different surveys. But I will say that we do model ours after National Main Street Survey. So sometimes the questions are very similar or the same. And the reason for that is because I want to be able to compare apples to apples as closely as possible. And so I know that if I ask similar questions in the Georgia survey versus what they're asking on the national level, that I'll be able to kind of see how we compare to what else is happening around the country. And the other thing is that the National Main Street program tries to incentivize people to take the national survey from the program manager's perspective, but it's not required. Now, our state one is required. All of our states that are in the program, the Main Street America program, are required. We are required to do a survey with you guys, and you guys are required to participate. So there is that level of like accountability that has to happen. But I've talked with National about like, well, since we're already required to do one, why are we not all just doing this one together, right? So that way we could get a better feel for what's happening nationwide. But one step at a time. All right. So first I want to say in regards to the national survey response, thank you so much because we did have a great response. I reached out to National to ask them, how many people participated and what was that participation level like? And they told us that we had the highest participation of any state program. And that we had 67 communities that completed the survey, which I know for me, I'm like, oh, we could have done better. That's the competitive side in me coming out to play. But honestly, this is great. And I talked with the team because there's not a lot of other states that could give us a run for our money as far as how many programs we have, but there are a few. So Texas, North Carolina, I believe it's Indiana, they all have upwards of 100 plus programs. So if they wanted to, they could beat us in these numbers, but they haven't yet. So that's good for us. So I want to say thank you to the people who took the time to fill it out. And I did promise that we would work with National to choose at random one person's name who submitted and participated in the national survey. And what we would do is pay for your conference registration to our state conference, right? As a again, just a little something to say thank you for doing this and to incentivize you guys to participate. And so I asked National to draw at random a name and they let me know. And I'm so excited to announce that Ariel Alexander of Dahlonega was chosen to receive the free complimentary registration to the state conference. So we will work with Ariel and the Georgia Downtown Association to provide her that complimentary registration to the conference that'll be happening in Canton in August. So thank you guys so much for all of your participation and congratulations, Ariel. So typically when I am doing kind of the overview of numbers and stuff like that, I'm looking at what is happening in our programs and locally, kind of like on the ground and statewide perspective from year to year, and kind of trying to analyze those trends in that data and be able to say, oh, we've had growth here, we've had evolution here, we've had a decrease there. One of the things I kind of want to do a little bit different this year is because all of our numbers are really just moving along the way that they should be. There's growth happening in all areas. And I would say it's all good and steady and consistent, but there's nothing that was just like overwhelmingly like, oh my gosh, I need to absolutely talk about this. So what I wanted to do was actually compare what's happening in Georgia to what has been happening nationally, looking at those national survey results. And I was fortunate enough to have Michael at the national level share that, like the actual data side of it with me, so I could like deep dive into what they received response wise and kind of compare it to where we are as a state. And so the next few slides is really going to be looking at it through the lens of what's happening here versus what's happening in the rest of the country. So starting with organizational setup, nationally, 60% of the programs are set up as nonprofits, and that nonprofit designation tends to be a 501c3. So that is interesting because in Georgia, we are primarily set up as an entity of the city. And so when we're looking at that nationally, only about 31% are set up as government entities. And so that is really strong and predominant for us here. We find that structure really works because when you are an entity of the city, or when you're set up and connected to the city in that way, you're getting that really, really valuable support. And I think that's why we see our private and public investment numbers where they are, because we have that stability as programs, we have that stability as managers, we have that funding stability. And again, I think that's where we see those kind of correlations coming to play. But it is interesting just because the majority of the programs that are in the Main Street network, see here, are actually set up as nonprofits. And in our state too, the few that are set up as nonprofits, we tend to see a lot more set up as the 501c6. And that's because of hotel motel tax, right? So in order to be able to take advantage of hotel motel tax, you have to be set up as a 501c6 so you can be classified as a designated marketing organization. And we again see that because that makes sense, and then our programs are able to tap into those revenue streams and really take advantage of it. So again, that's just an interesting dichotomy that we've seen here versus other places. I know in Alabama, most of them are set up as nonprofits. I know in Mississippi, I believe 100% of them are set up as nonprofits. There are a few other states like ours where they are more municipal driven, but again, we are a little bit of the exception and not the rule in this case. Annual operating budget. I was hoping that y'all would find this as interesting as I do. So this is kind of a breakdown for all the programs that responded. And so if you can't see the little writing, what I will promise is that when I upload this to YouTube, I will also include a PDF of this. And so that way you can go through at your own pace and read the information and see it for yourself and scroll into the numbers if you want. But just to give you a feel of where things are programmatic wise, the big chunk of majority of programs are down here in this range, and it looks like it's 200,000 to just under 500,000. So $499,999 is this big green chunk of change down here on the right. And so I want to be able to show you where our programs kind of fall. And for our affiliates, the budgets tend to fall right here into the $414,000 range. And then for our classic and gems, we are actually above average when it comes to that. So just over that 500,000 mark at 503 for our classic and gems communities, which is truly, truly incredible. Even for our affiliates, when you look at this entire budget and, all ends of the spectrum, obviously you can see that Georgia programs are very, very well supported. with the budgets nationally, they ask the question, and we ask this question every year too, like, is your budget increasing, decreasing, staying the same? And when it is, like, what is increasing, what is decreasing? So again, me trying to compare apples to apples as much as possible. I was trying to look at some of the same numbers that they were pulling. So National said that 88% of their budgets remained the same or increased. And in Georgia, 91% of our budgets remain the same or increased. And you can see that little graph here for yourself. So we had a 52% increase in financial support for our programs. And then we had another 39% that said their budgets remain the same. Manager turnover. Lord have mercy, y'all. Last year, when I got on and did the state of the program, I was so proud because I was like, we have not really had much manager turnover. We've had so much stability, great resignation. What is that? I don't even know what you're talking about. And then everybody decided to leave. Like, literally, I think I finished our presentation, and then within the next hour it was like boom boom boom, everybody's leaving. And so I was like, I jinxed us. I'm never going to say this again, even if it's true. But I wanted y'all to be able to see kind of manager turnover and experience nationally versus what's happening in Georgia. So nationally, the average years of experience is 5 years, which is, I would say, that's not bad at all. There's, for people who have less than 2 years experience, 31%. Again, that's truly good considering like the entire impact of their network. In Georgia, we're struggling a little bit more there to keep the people from having that constant turnover. And I will say we've had so much turnover in the past year. It really has been crazy. So when I say that we've been working with a lot of new managers to get people up to speed and to get them sorted and in compliance and all that stuff, you can see why. So in Georgia, 50% at the very bottom there, you'll see 50% of our managers have been here 2 years or less, right? So on national, level, that's 31%. Here in Georgia, literally dead in the middle, half have been here 2 years or less. And that's where a lot of struggle comes into play, right? Because there's a lot of technical expertise and support that has to go in to helping get a new manager up to speed. And that varies very greatly than how we're supporting a program and a manager that's been there in that 6 to 10 years time frame, right? Like, you need very different things. And so we are grateful to have Ellen's position funded and in our office, because again, it's really allowed us to kind of diverge like roles and to let Ellen take the lead with compliance and working with communities that have had manager turnover and they have that new staff coming in. And then again, let Elizabeth take that focus and working with the affiliates and the startups, again, knowing that they need different stuff. And then I would say Tess, myself, and Ebony end up working with programs that have a little bit more stability and that are needing a little bit more advanced support and help. And so again, we believe in cross-training in our office, and we want to help in all different ways, but that's kind of like the different roles we've all taken on. I would love to see this number of that 3 to 5 years and that 6 to 10 years continue to grow that percentage. So we've got 24% of our managers that have been here 3 to 5 years, 14% that have been here 6 to 10 years. Again, I would love to see that continue to increase, and we're going to continue to do everything that we can to support you guys in that process. I will say to all our new managers, and I say this to you, whether we're in assessments or just talking one-on-one, it does get easier. It truly does. But the challenge is you have to be around long enough to develop your own support system. to develop your own processes and procedures, and to be able to have gone through everything at least once or twice and figure out how you can do it better. So that first year or two, you're really drinking through a fire hose. You're just trying to figure it out. You're trying to figure out who's there and who's able to help you and how you're going to make all this work. And it can be really frustrating, especially if you don't have that support system that you really need in place. And so if you are struggling with that, please reach out to us, because we can help kind of guide you through that and have some discussions. And the Georgia Downtown Association has an incredible mentor-mentee program where you can get partnered up with someone who does have more experience than you, and be able to realize that you've got somebody else in this that is been where you are and where you're going, and that you're not on the journey alone. A couple more national observations. I didn't compare this to Georgia because we didn't necessarily ask some of this data, but I wanted to be able to still kind of report it. On the national level, 75% reported having earned an advanced degree. Now, we do ask that question. So we ask, like, what's your highest level of education? And I would say Georgia is on trend with what that number is. So having a bachelor's, a master's, or a doctorate. And then, but this section here, where Main Street directors, and they're looking at race and gender, we don't necessarily ask those questions in our survey. But nationally, they observed that Main Street directors are more likely to be white and are more likely to be women. Leadership salary. And so when we talk about leadership salary, basically we're talking about the Main Street directors salary. And so this is kind of like the salary spread. So the top highest paying programs where the managers are all consistently making more are Washington, D.C. So it's DC. I mean, that's not surprising. I think it's Washington State. Again, cost of living and everything like that. When you look at that, that one's not surprising. North Carolina, y'all, is beating us. That is surprising, because I'm like, we can do better. We can do more. And then Texas was doing really well as well. And I think Colorado. So you see kind of like the spread here, this number right here in the middle, where I would say it's kind of like the biggest chunk of 23%. And this range right here, this little box here in the middle, is the $50,000 to $59,000 salary range. And so this is where our Georgia folks fall. So our classic and affiliate communities fall in the $56,000 salary range. And then our GEMS communities fall in this higher bracket of the $67,000 salary. So, I mean, I think when you look at it overall of what's happening on a national level, we're doing good, but I do know we could do better. And I do have some recommendations. So if you feel like you're looking at these numbers here and that doesn't reflect where you are personally, I've got a few suggestions for you. Oh man, it's not the next slide, it's a slide after that. Sorry. So salary observations. Salaries, when I looked at like what our numbers have been over the past 10 years, they have been on a steady incline, with this past year, 50% of all programs indicating that they've received a raise since the last survey. Now, I will say that a third of them, about 30%, said that they weren't applicable, again, because they were new. So again, you have to take that into context with how many new managers we've had coming in. But again, I think there is an opportunity for growth here. And so one of the things we get asked a lot is always that question of like, I want to ask for more money, or I feel like I'm being underpaid, or, you know, that kind of, argument, in wanting to be able to have some data to really help you make that ask. So a couple things. If you feel like you want more money, or that you are underpaid for your services, keep in mind that the people that are in our industry, as in like the Main Street world, that are making more money are truly making economic development the top priority, right? So they are not seen as party planners. They are seen as economic developers. And that means the things that they're working on, the things that they're doing are truly economic development driven. They are using all the capacity and abilities of a downtown development authority. They are purchasing property. They are renovating property. They are turning it around. They are, out there actively recruiting businesses. They are soliciting, sponsorships. They are, building capital, raising capital in order to be able to do projects. Next, I would say that if in this next year, you want to be able to ask for more money, or if you feel like, again, that you're not where you need to be, you need to become meticulous about tracking your program's impact. And I will say that the programs that are funded the best and whose programs keep receiving more funding are the ones that really make monthly reporting a priority. And I'm just going to give Brunswick a shout out right now, because we were down there doing assessments. They were doing their GEMS redesignation, and their program has continued to receive more and more funding. And they're in this position where the city is just like wanting to put more money into it. Not even necessarily that they're like, hey, give us more money. It's that the city itself is saying, oh no, this is a priority. We have to invest in this. But when you talk to Matthew Hill about what's happening on the ground, he has his own Excel spreadsheet that he pulls up and that he can show you meticulously all the data that he has been tracking for years. He knows in and out his numbers, and he is such an advocate for why monthly reporting is so important. And I always tell him, I was like, I just want you do a pitch on this, because it's one thing for us to say it, but it's another thing for other managers to say it. And I always say this: it is job security, folks. When you want to work with elected officials and know, how do I get more support? That's where this comes into play. You have to be tracking your impact, and you have to be telling your story. So that goes into the next two lines, right? Learn how to advocate. So you need to be able to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, asking for what you need, advocating for yourself and for the program. You got to become your own spokesperson, right? If you're not doing it, nobody's going to do it for you. And so again, you just have to become getting comfortable with tooting your own horn, right? And advocating for yourself. I think salary studies, like when you're looking at the numbers, like I just showed you, it's good for when you're like coming in and trying to negotiate where your base pay should be. I think that can be very helpful. But I think if you are a manager that's been there for a little bit, it's not going to serve you the way you think it's going to serve you. Because what I will tell you is that if you're a manager, you've been there 2 years, you want to ask for a raise, going in and saying other people are making this much is not going to do anything for you, because what they're going to be doing is looking at their budget and saying, that's great, and I appreciate that, but we're not that community, or we're this size, or we're whatever, and this is what we have. It all comes down to what you are doing and what you have done, right? Which then circles all the way back to like, what is your, impact, right? And so that's where like tracking what you are doing as a program, what is in our work plan, how are we accomplishing these things, what have we been able to achieve, how many businesses are we supporting, how many have we been able to help open up, like what kind of growth is happening. Again, it's all going to be connected to what you are personally doing for your program. And so that's where, again, being accountable is just really, really important. And we can give you all the data that you want, but ultimately, it's what is happening on the ground locally that's really going to make the difference. So with support staff, I am so excited to say that we are leading the charge here. So nationally, Main Street organizations continue to operate with very few paid staff members, but are very, very volunteer driven, right? Basically, it's a nice way of saying there's one person doing it all and not a lot of support. In Georgia, that has been changing and evolving very much so over the past several years. In Georgia, 50%, and you can see the little graphic that I pulled from our data, 57% of our programs have support staff, and that number keeps growing year after year. And that is incredible to think that if you think that more than half of our programs are 10,000 or less in population. So the majority of them are small communities, but yet over half of our programs in total have support staff. That's just, again, that's incredible news and something to be very proud of. If you are unfortunately one of those people that doesn't have support staff and you need more help, or you have support staff but you feel like you need more, I have some advice for you too. So if you want some more support staff, again, it goes back to tracking your work. And this is not just the idea of tracking like that overall impact of like how many businesses are being opened and how many jobs are being created. It's tracking your work as in what are you doing on a day-to-day basis? Where is your time being invested? What are the biggest time sucks for you? Like where does your time go and how can you do something more effectively? Like I could do X if I had Y, right? But you need to be able to have that data to make that argument. Again, monthly reporting is important. You need to make sure that you're celebrating your wins. Again, that goes back to being your own best advocate and your own cheerleader, but making sure that you're being vocal enough about what's happening. The other thing is if you want more support, the irony is you're gonna have to be saying no to a few things. And I know that, you know, in the Main Street world, we don't want to tell anybody no, right? We want to be the people of yes. But if we're that person that is always saying yes and always agreeing to things, then they think that we're capable of doing that. They think we're capable of managing all that, and that we're able to take on more because we always have, right? But if we want to advocate for more staff, more support, that means we're going to have to draw a line somewhere and say we can only do so much. And again, that really connects back with tracking your work, right? You know, I would love to do this, but I can't because we're already committed to X, Y, and Z. So you're going to have to say no more if you want to be able to advocate for why you need more support. And this all goes back to telling your story effectively. And I would also say prioritizing how you delegate and using the board, right, to help, you know, reproduce the manager, as in like make more of you out there to do more things. And so in our kind of like little world, we get really good about being production driven and just focusing on putting our nose to the grindstone and moving forward and doing. We have to get better about helping to reproduce leaders and helping to empower other folks to help support our program and ourselves. And that means we have to prioritize delegation. We have to take time to teach other people about how to do the job and how they can better support us. And the challenge is that it takes time to do that, right? Like you have to stop and be intentional and have a conversation. And then you always hear the like, well, oh, I could just do it myself quicker and easier and better. And you're like, but can you? Because if you're halfway doing all these other things, you know, are you really putting the most and are you really getting the best out of yourself in that situation, right? And so when we stop and take the time to empower other people in those positions, in the long run, it helps benefit us and maybe even potentially gets us more staff and support. Our boards, while we tend to see that our staff is, you know, female and white, our boards overall nationally, and again, we don't track this locally, but nationally are much more diverse in gender, race, and age than our managers themselves, which I think is great. You know, if we're not going to see that diversity necessarily on the director manager level, we want to make sure that the diversity of the community is being represented in other ways. And nationally, they said there were 3 or 4 areas that were not being represented as much on boards. So non-native English speakers was the first group that was being underrepresented. People with disabilities, right? whatever those disabilities are. And then one of them that they had noted was people under 18. And I'm like, well, realistically, you're not going to have people under 18 probably serving on your board of directors. So I did not include that here because I felt like that was maybe an underserved group, but not necessarily relative in how we're developing our board of directors. But the other section that they didn't mention, but that I thought was super, super important when I was looking at the data is that one area that we tend to not have representation of on our boards is local school leadership. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's such a big disconnect. So and when I say local school leadership, I mean either your school boards or, whatever, if it's a university or a technical school, or even just your local high school, middle school, your local schools leadership. If you want to be able to reach a broader audience, a younger audience, that means we have to not just expect them to come to where we are, we have to meet them where they are at already. And that means reaching out to them, finding the right person that can help connect us, and inviting them to be a part of that conversation and participate in what we're doing. And so on the right-hand side, you'll see here that the majority of our boards, 57%, serve two roles, meaning that they are Main Street and something else. And that primary secondary component is Main Street DDA combo. And so again, this pie keeps getting a little bit bigger year after year. I think that's a good thing. We're seeing a lot of consolidation, a lot of, let's figure out how we can all work towards, good stuff together versus like each on our own. Priorities that were identified for 2023, DEIA, which stands for Diversity, Equity, Inclusivity, and Accessibility, was identified by over 70% of programs nationally as a priority, realizing that programs need to connect with young people, that they need to do a better job of connecting with diverse small business owners, underrepresented ethnic groups in your community, and then real estate developers, which I thought was really interesting. But we've seen a huge DEI push from national. This is one of their top core values, is being a more inclusive program, being a more inclusive leadership organization, making sure that we are being more inclusive in our communities and truly understanding who makes up our communities and how we can better incorporate them into what we're doing. And so what we're committed to doing here in Georgia is helping you with this through training. We're looking at different resources that we can put together to provide you, and different kind of trainings that we can put together for board of directors to help empower them, and also learn through shared learning experiences. And that means training, right? So what trainings can we offer? What workshops can we do in person to help increase that equity, inclusivity, accessibility conversation? These are the 5 challenges that were identified nationally. So top one was inconsistent or limited store hours. Second one was building maintenance and condition. Then we saw store variety, infrastructure, and housing shortage. I would say nothing on this list is like a big surprise here. I mean, I would say, yeah, all those make sense, and the order probably makes sense from a national level. On what's happening locally on the ground in Georgia is a little bit different. And that is because we added one specific category that national didn't add. And that is, we talked about staff challenges, and not just for us, but for the businesses themselves. And so hands down, staff shortages for our small businesses in our downtowns was identified as like the biggest challenge here in Georgia. And we've seen it and we've heard it over and over and over. And I don't necessarily think it's going away right now. I think we're just having to learn how to adapt to this new environment and figure out what that means for us and how we're going to move forward. Following the staff shortages, then we heard about store variety. I think it's interesting because we have some communities who are very restaurant heavy. We have other ones that are very retail heavy. We have other ones that may be very professional services heavy, and trying to figure out what's that balance, right? And then for us, board member retention, development, and engagement came in at number 3, which I thought was really interesting. We heard, and I'll get into this a little bit, a lot about volunteers and just that volunteer base being different than what it was pre-pandemic. And I think we're seeing that reflected here, even in board member retention and development. Then inconsistent store hours and the demand for housing. I said that I would circle back on this a little bit earlier when I talked about our housing numbers. So our housing, as far as new housing units, was a little more than half of what it was the previous year. But what I have been hearing, and some of our staff has been hearing throughout the state, is that right now it's that there's opportunities for upper story residential. It's just, how do we empower people who already own the property, who already have commercial tenants on the bottom story, to feel like they're in a position to make that investment on the top floors, especially when you have things like sprinkler systems and fire codes and other stuff like that, that can end up being cost prohibitive. And so we're working with the housing department at DCA to see what we can do to address some of those needs, and how we can help you guys answer the demand for housing with the availability that you have in converting those upper story units into residential units. I don't have the answer for you today, but I want you to know that we are in active conversations with many different entities to figure out how we can support you in this moving forward. Training in 2023, and we are coming to the end, I promise. So there's a couple opportunities coming up. There's a webinar that we're going to be doing in April with Andy about business improvement districts. I had the pleasure of listening to Andy do this presentation a few weeks ago when we were in Noonan, and it was just so incredible. I thought how she characterized it and really talked about how they have made the business improvement district work for them in Rome, and really doing kind of a deep dive into what that means. And I just thought that was such an incredible presentation, and also something that is doable, achievable for a lot of programs. Special tax districts can be very complex, but business improvement districts tend to be that low-hanging fruit that I think a lot of people can do and achieve, but it's that knowledge gap that can be intimidating and scary. And I think she's going to do an incredible job in helping kind of like close that gap for everybody. And then in May, we are doing an in-person training in Dublin that's going to focus on successful downtown project management. So if you are all about like, we want to take economic development to the next level, we want to have our downtown development authority get comfortable with buying, renovating, doing some pre-development costs for projects, this is the training you're going to want to be joining in on. And then in July, we are working with Kira and Lisa in Stockbridge to do an awesome Christmas in July webinar that's going to focus on how do we get ready for shopping small. I feel like we always wait till it's too late to talk about shopping small and what we're doing. And so we wanted to back it up further so that way we could have a really good, authentic conversation about like, how do you maximize your impact to Small Business Saturday in a way that did it in a time frame that allowed you to adapt and make changes as you need to far enough in advance so you could actually implement some stuff this year. And then switch to 6. We talked about the switch to 6 a little bit in January, and then some in a webinar, I think it was February. I don't know, it's all blending together, guys. But here's some training opportunities. In June, we're going to be doing an in-person switch to 6 training that will do a deep dive into understanding the new 6 standards for accreditation. That will be in Macon. There will be a cost to attend, but we're trying to keep it as affordable as possible. We're having to rent some space, and we need to cover our costs. Then in August, we're going to do a Main Street 101 one that will include the Switch to 6 component as part of the Georgia Downtown Conference. That will be the only 101 we do in person if you have folks that need to participate. And then in September, we're going to do a webinar that talks about how do we pull this all together and prepare for the next year's annual assessment cycle. And I also want to say that if you are one of those people that doesn't want to wait till June to start learning about this, or even till the conference, that we on our website already have an online training of the Switch to 6 up and running. We've already had 80 programs or 80 people sign up and participate in it. And actually, we have opened the platform to our other, what we like to call Sweet Tea regional states. So Florida, the Carolinas, Kentucky, Alabama, and we have people from all over the South taking this Switch to 6 training. And we've gotten incredible feedback from it. And so I encourage you, if you're ready to just start learning and moving forward, to visit our website and our training section to learn about all these different resources and opportunities. And you can start signing up for these things today. And then last but not least, we've got Mobilize Main Street. We typically do this in the spring, but because of the National Main Street Conference this month, we decided to move it to the fall. So this event will be October 3rd through 5th. We typically only have about 30 spots available, and we're going to be going to Fayetteville, Newnan, and LaGrange, which I'm so excited about. When registration gets ready for this, you're going to want to get on top of it. We typically sell out in a matter of hours, if not like 24 hours, just because, again, it's the idea, if you go to a conference and you love mobile tours and you love that experience of going on a mobile tour and getting to see something in person and learn from the people who are doing the project, it's like that, but over multiple days. It's just that experience times 100. So keep an eye on that, because again, seating is limited. And then lastly, a couple annual assessment takeaways. So one of the things that I loved with this year's annual assessment process is that we had a group of about 25 folks who we called our beta group, who were working under the Switch to 6 kind of framework. And we got to hear them do presentations in person and use a new template and use some of the new documentation for what has been created for the new 6 standards. And it was really great. We got great feedback from the participants themselves. Nothing was super scary or intimidating. And one of the things that I enjoyed the most is I felt like we had much more productive conversations with the communities because of it, right? So it gave you an opportunity ahead of time to really tell us how you need assistance or what you're looking for to come out of the conversations that we're going to have in person. And again, led us through kind of like the discovery of your program and like where you're at, and guided us through that process a lot more smoothly, and then felt less like us having to ask a million questions of you to get to where we need to be, but instead having a much more fluid back and forth dynamic conversation. Another thing is that we have heard that over and over and over, homelessness or people without homes, unhoused people, whatever the politically correct way of saying it is nowadays, is homelessness is an increasingly present challenge in our communities. And that's not just for communities of larger size, that is for all communities. And we're talking about communities of 2,500 people all the way up to communities of 100,000 people. This has been something that has been evolving since COVID and is not really going away. Again, this is one of those things that there's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all solution for this, but there are resources out there and communities that we can connect you with. But I think the biggest takeaway there is that in order to address this need in your community, you have to be willing to invest in how you support this underserved group of people, right? So it's not, pack them up and ship them out kind of solution. It is you have to truly invest time in getting to know people and connecting them with services. Because a lot of times it's that we have these services, it's just nobody's taking the time to get to understand what people truly need and how we can better connect them to those services. And so some of the communities that have had the most success in addressing these issues have put staff into it, like the city and the county have put, jobs into, helping to navigate these waters and again, connecting this underserved group with resources. So that's one thing I will say, that we have people who have had success and can help talk you through some suggestions, but it is something you're going to have to put resources into. Lastly, programs have to work harder to gain and keep volunteers. We've heard that a lot. We just did a volunteer webinar with Jason and Hartwell. And I will say that, a lot of people are having to look at volunteers in a new way, right? Not this idea of people wanting to participate for 3-4 years and serve on something in perpetuity. It's the idea of like meeting people where they are, letting them participate and then move on as needed. And then also that the Main Street approach works well when you work it. And that means Main Street can't just be something that you're rubber stamping. You have to truly be working the whole approach comprehensively. And if you are doing that, then you will get out of it what you put into it. And lastly, that the most successful programs that we met with have the right people in the room. And what I mean by that is that it's about leadership, but in a holistic way. So, having good leadership, it's not just about having good support on the board or having good city leadership. It's also about stability from the manager's perspective, right? And I always like to kind of refer to it as the triangle, right? We've got 3 different sides here, but any variation in one of those components can, change the whole dynamic, right? And so again, you can have a very strong board and a very capable manager, but if you don't have that city leadership there supporting the program and what the program's working on, there's a disconnect. So I will say that the programs that we heard and met with that were doing the best stuff made sure that all the right people were in the room. And whoever that was on the city leadership side, whether that was the mayor, maybe it was the city manager, maybe it was just the community development director or the supervisor, it may have been multiple board members, depending on who's the movers and shakers, and then again, having staff there. But the right people were in the room being a part of that conversation. And so for the communities that we're going to be meeting with next year in person, we're coming up to the North Georgia areas. Just keep that in mind. Again, we want to make sure that the right people are in the room so we can have those conversations and help you guys evolve your programs to the next level. So that's it. I know it's like, that's a lot, but I appreciate y'all's time. And I know that we're already over time. So if you have to go, that's fine. And if not, I'll stick around and see if there's any questions. All right.
I have one question.
Yes.
I just took over this role in January, and one thing, I don't know if everybody else has had this issue, but long time ago, this was called Better Hometown Forsyth or something like that. And the name has now changed to Main Street. I've had a hard time getting the name change process started. I don't really know where to start. So I don't know if this is something that somebody here could help me with as far as where I start. But I haven't really been able to get a lot of help around here as far as what I need to do just to make like the bank accounts match up to what the checks say when people write me checks. Like it just doesn't match.
Anybody in particular want to tackle that or before I jump in? I mean, so for example, like Bethany and Blackshear, they still go by Better Hometown. That's okay. So you have to decide what you want to be called. Better Hometown was just like, it was the same designation, but just for communities of a smaller size. And so when we made the switch to not like have different names for everybody, we just told everybody like, hey, we're going to be calling you on Main Street from now on. It's up to you whether you want to keep it. And I know in Blackshear they did keep it because they had been kind of like branded that way for so long. Bethany, do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. We still keep that brand, but when I refer to my program, it is the Main Street Better Hometown Blackshear program. My Main Street program is my city funded, and then my Better Hometown Blackshear is my 501c6. And so it just flows. Everybody knows it's the same. On my bank accounts, it still says Better Hometown Blackshear. And so when somebody writes me a check, they still write Better Hometown Blackshear. We've had no problem at all. And everybody knows that it's still connected. I mean, it's still one. It's symbiotic. It's one and the same. So that probably doesn't help you with your bank accounts, but that's just, we're just tiny.
I think it's the point, you know, from both of our perspectives is it truly just depends what you're trying to achieve from it, you know, whether it's like that symbiotic relationship internally, if it's an external branding thing. But I know like Tess with our team, our communications coordinator, can kind of talk through some of that with you as far as like what would be the plus sides or like the negatives to changing stuff, and just kind of give you that like outside perspective as far as like branding, marketing yourself, like what would be the value there, and kind of like picking a name and sticking with it, or creating that kind of continuity of how you want to be referred to. Elizabeth?
One conversation we have a lot with communities is sometimes your external brand is different from what you call yourself internally. So a lot of our programs are Main Street programs, but their external brand is downtown X, Y, and Z. Just because if you don't have a Main Street, sometimes people don't understand that it's like, oh, you're talking about Main Street, but you're talking about downtown. They disconnect. So we see a lot of communities that it might be like downtown Noonan, but it's like the Downtown Development Authority is the Main Street Board, or there's a Main Street Board, all these different things. And so again, it's like that's a kind of a further conversation of like digging in, and we can schedule a call. All of our teammates are happy to do that, to kind of dig into what exactly your needs are, and we can make better suggestions based on that.
Yeah. So I think it's just, you know, we'll do a follow-up, because again, I kind of think it comes down to like what you're ultimately trying to achieve with it. Anybody else?
Hey, Jessica, I have a quick question. This,
Sure.
I know you had said that the board members needed to do switch to 6 training. The online one that y'all have currently up, is that what we should recommend them go through, or
So if they're anybody new who has to go through the full 101, it is incorporated already in that.
Okay.
But I know for a lot of your folks, Heather, they've already done the full 101. So what we have done is taken those very specific components out of 101 and just made it its own thing. And there is no paywall. It's completely accessible for free. And so you can either have your folks watch it on its own, or you could do a little component at each board meeting, you know, just watch a section, you know, and that way, you know, you've after 6 meetings, you know, pretty much covered your bases.
Okay.
You know, whatever works best, I think, for y'all.
Okay, yeah, I actually signed up to do it so I could do it before I said, hey, y'all go do this, so I could kind of tell them what to expect. So I haven't started yet, but I signed up. So thank you.
Yep. Colleen, what's up?
Hey,
Earlier,
I'm right here. Earlier in the presentation, you touched on one of the managers who had been meticulously tracking data. And as someone who doesn't really know what all kind of data to get, I would love to see a sample list of data. And I know that you know, it depends on what, you know, works well, just to be able to present data to the council so they can see what we're doing. Yeah, so does that exist? Does that, it probably exists in people's minds, but maybe not on a piece of paper.
It does exist. And I know Elizabeth has some kind of like Excel documents too of like tracking that she can share. So I'm just making a little note to follow up and even connect you to Matthew and, you know, let him talk about like what he's looking for and how he best used that to advocate for funding.
Thank you.
Mhm. Anybody else? I know we've got Hillary in Tifton. Is this is your first time joining us, right?
I hopped on late to the one back in February. So this is my first full one, I guess we could say.
Awesome. Awesome. Glad to have you. This is not a typical format for us, so I do apologize because normally we do all this at the beginning. So you'll have to come back to next month so we can do a proper introduction of,
Absolutely. Looking
of
forward
you
to
to
it.
everybody.
Jessica, I don't know if you saw the question that Emily had about some training on delegation, but I definitely think that would be a good thing as well. I just recently had my assistant apply for another job, and we're kind of having to. I've been asked what do I need an assistant for? Like, what would they do? So, and it's kind of hard because I struggle with delegation because I feel I have that mentality of I'll just do it myself. But I know if I want to grow the program, I really am going to need somebody that's going to kind of be like my right hand in order for me to really grow the program the way I want to. So some training on that, or just kind of knowing what type of stuff, when to delegate to where you don't feel like you're giving your job away, but you're still not, you have an assistant and you don't really give them anything to do.
Yeah. I think that's it's a very timely topic and we can absolutely, I think that's a great suggestion. Maybe Ellen, just make a note, we can incorporate that into one of our like monthly webinars and see who we could bring in to kind of talk about that. And I can talk with you too more offline if you just want to have a conversation about like where to start or kind of like good next steps and stuff like that. Anybody else?
I don't want to ask all the questions, but I got one more.
That's fine. You go.
Okay, I know we have the Facebook page where all the managers are on, but I know sometimes we don't really get a lot of responses there. Is there somewhere else we can send messages to when we have questions? Because I see a lot of times where people ask questions, or even I've asked questions, I don't really get any responses. Do you have a suggestion of somewhere else we can go to get responses from everybody that's with Main Street?
Yeah, I mean, I can make a suggestion. So everybody who is an accredited program has access to your, I think it's called The Point with the National Main Street Center. And they have a listserv that updates every day and people post questions on there. So you would get responses from everyone all over the country. That might also be a good one to look into, Kimmy.
Another good one too that's not really facilitated by anybody is the downtown happy hour one, and that's nationwide as well. There's people from all over the state, so if you're looking for something that's maybe not in our state, that's a good one to look into as well.
Who moderates that one, or who set it up? Abigail?
Ben Muldrew.
Oh, okay, yeah,
and I can't remember the other guy's name.
Yeah,
gotcha.
But yeah, if you look downtown happy hour, they do like a happy hour unconference like session, a downtown unconference, and it's a really good resource too when you're just looking for something new and fresh that you haven't seen anywhere. You know, there's a lot of people on there from across all the nation.
Strong Towns is another good group that has people who ask questions on there too. So.
And sometimes if people aren't responding, like you can always go and search topics, because there may be somebody who's responded like to the same question like a while ago, but nobody's responding right now. Sometimes that can be helpful. All right, guys. Well, I won't keep y'all, but we'll stay on, like the team will stay on in case you have any more stuff you want to ask us one-on-one.
Jessica,
I
did you
think
want to
y'all-
mention, did you want to mention the assessment write-ups?
Yes, I was going to put a slide in there about that and I totally forgot. Assessment write-ups are in Dropbox. So everybody's assessment write-up is in Dropbox, in your personal Dropbox. You can check it out today. You've got 24 hours to give somebody notice before we send out emails and say, hey, by the way, assessments have been sent out, and if you need to give someone an update about probationary status or any kind of status designation changes or anything like that, this is your 24-hour warning to get ahead of it. But they have all been completed and were uploaded to Dropbox yesterday, so check it out. If you don't see yours for some reason, reach out to Ellen and she can make sure that you know where to find it. But honestly, everybody did great this year. Yeah, there's nothing, nobody should be surprised. No crazy surprises coming. And for anybody who's missing documentation, you'll have till May 1st to get it in. But after that, cut you off. Just kidding. We don't cut you off, but you have till that deadline to make it happen. Thank y'all. Y'all have a great week.
Bye.
Bye.